guys? Welcome to another episode of the Young Guns podcast. And today we have another trade to announce. Jeff Petry has been traded from the Montreal Canadiens to the Detroit Red Wings in exchange for Gustav Lindstrom and a 2025 fourth round pick that is conditional. The condition is that Montreal will receive the later of Detroit or Boston's fourth round picks. Now, why was this trade made? Well, if you guys remember in the Penguins deal for Erik Karlsson, Montreal was the third team involved. And in that third team, obviously, being the third team, they obviously acquired a few guys in that deal. They acquired Jeff Petry, they acquired Nathan Legare, they acquired a second round pick, and they acquired Casey DeSmith. And the belief is that the Canadiens were going to flip Jeff Petry at some point and get some more assets. And that's exactly what they do here. They retain 50% of their salary of his salary, which is $3.343 million dollars in cap space, and they end up trading him to Detroit, and they acquire a 24-year-old defenseman from Sweden who's a right-handed defenseman, Gustav Lindstrom. Who this year played 36 games for the Red Wings, 1 goal, 7 assists, 8 points, a -16. This is a guy that he's a depth defenseman. He's a guy who's going to be a good 6, 7, maybe eighth D in the NHL. He's got some potential. He was a second round pick in 2017, 38th overall. So there's potential there. And he's still young. He's 24 years old. So the Canadians get younger. They stick to what they're used to in terms of them being younger. But this is a guy that I think can provide some much needed, just depth on the blue line. And I know the Canadians are not really in a position to be a playoff team, but they have young guys in their prospect pools. They have a lot of prospects that I think can still use another year in Laval. And I think when you bring in a guy like Gustav Lindstrom, he's still at a point where he can be an NHL defenseman. I mean, he played 63 games in 21-22 at 13 points. This year played 36, had 8 points. So he's definitely an NHL defenseman. I don't know if he's an everyday NHL defenseman, but he's definitely an NHL defenseman. And I think under Marty St. Louis, he may be able to find himself and find this game again. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. Obviously, the fourth round pick is the fourth round pick. But as for Jeff Petry, this is what we want to speak about. So Petry, this is a guy who is from Ann Arbor, Michigan. His dad played baseball in Michigan. He was born there, and so I think Jeff Petry wanted to come back to back to the Detroit Red Wings. He wanted to come back home. He wanted to be a Michigan boy, and he wanted to play closer to family. And I think the Canadians do this as a way to kind of basically show gratitude to Jeff Petry and basically show that they're doing him a solid, they're doing him a favor by going back to Detroit. I know it's not the best return. We're talking about a defenseman who played 61 games for the Penguins last year, 5 goals, 26 assists, 31 points. Obviously, the year before that, he was with the Canadiens, where they acquired Mike Matheson in that deal. So obviously Kent Hughes doesn't get the same amount of value back, but I think it's more so the fact that Petry wanted to play in Michigan. I think Detroit wanted Jeff Petry, and I think that there was an opportunity there for Kent Hughes to look at it and say, you know what, we're going to do this guy a solid. We're going to trade him back to Detroit, back home. I know he's never played for Detroit, so I don't know why I'm saying back to Detroit, but he's going back to Michigan, where he started, where he played his junior hockey for Michigan State. So there's definitely a home feeling for Jeff Petry, and obviously for his wife as well. The family's near there, so it's good for Jeff Petry to finally play closer to home, which I think is nice for him. Now, obviously, if you look at just in general, Jay Fresh tweeting out, Jeff Petry acquired at $2.4 million by Detroit. Is a veteran two-way defenseman who likes to shoot from the point and has a solid finishing touch for a blue liner. Definitely dipped a bit last season, but didn't completely fall off. And so, look, he's 35. Jeff Petry wasn't fantastic for the Penguins last year, but he definitely was not terrible. And so I think that there's definitely a solid defenseman there. And at $2.4 million, Detroit's getting themselves a very good, top 4, top 6 defenseman who I think can play, a really good two-way game for them. And, for a team battling for the playoffs, this is a defenseman who is going to essentially, be a big presence for them, right? He's a fourth pairing, top 4 pairing D. he's a guy that I think can definitely be on your second power play unit. So there's definitely some strong excitement there for sure. And if you look at Daily Faceoff, they have him paired on the top four with Ben Sherratt, who he's familiar with playing with his time in Montreal. So there's definitely some familiarity with him there. And just behind Moritz Seider, which I think makes a lot of sense. Like I said before, I think he's going to quarterback the second power play for Detroit. So it might be a turnaround for Jeff Petry. And like I said, with the fact that he's from Ann Arbor, Michigan, there's definitely a possibility that it ends up working out. Now, obviously, if you go and look at the other Habs fans' reactions, I mean, listen, this is probably an underwhelming move if you're the Canadians, simply for the fact that you're acquiring a defenseman that isn't really at his best. He hasn't really shown much at the NHL level. At the end of the day, you know, Montreal decided to do a favor for Jeff Petry. So in terms of actual assets, it's not the best. But with that in mind, the Canadians are now going to be able. They're going to have to send two players down for opening events, then put price on Thierry and have over $10 million in cap space. So right now they're above $3 million above the cap ceiling, which I think is fine for that. Look, he gets to go home. I don't, as a Habs fan, I think there's definitely a lot of not surprised, but I think it's more so the fact that it's kind of just meh. If I'm being completely honest, it's meh. There isn't really much there to say or there to look at. The Canadians save about $1.3 million in cap space, which is good. It's a trade essentially that just sends Jeff Petry home. And I think if you're Detroit, they win this deal 100%. They get the better player. They get a defenseman who is, like I said before, at the older end of his career at 35 years old, but can still definitely play. And I think that, being in the Atlantic Division is a little bit of a frustrating process, especially if you're the Canadians, because you're going to see him more often. But at the end of the day, he gets to go back home. His wife gets to be happy. And I think it's a win-win for everybody there. And for the Canadians, I mean, look, they get an asset, they get a draft pick, they get a defenseman in Gustav Lindstrom, who hopefully turns into something, maybe can be moved at a later date. But at the end of the day, it's nothing more than that. And so I'm curious to see what the Canadians are going to do next, moving forward with Gustav Lindstrom, who still signed a 1-year deal this year. So he's just coming off a $950,000. He's on a $950,000 contract this year. So good for him. Curious to see what he does. He's going to be playing for a contract, so it's going to be very interesting to see. And with that, boys and girls, let us know in the comments down below. What are your thoughts on this deal? What are your thoughts with Jeff Petry? Do you like this move for the Red Wings? Do you like this move for the Canadians? Please let us know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to subscribe. And we'll catch you in the next episode of the Young Guns podcast. Thank you very much for watching.